2 years ago, we got to record Of Thee I Sing, which was written for the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma bombing. When you're doing a big project like that that means so much to so many people, the important thing for us as audio engineers and producers is to meet with all of the people who are part of the creative team. So Jonathan, Alexander, all of the people here in the Oklahoma Philharmonic, and work with them to figure out what our vision of the final product is. And so that's really the starting point that we always look for, is what is our vision, what do we want this to be? And for this project, what we wanted it to be was really a reintroduction of the Oklahoma City Philharmonic to the world as a really premier orchestra that is doing innovative programming and is really doing it at the highest quality level. We absolutely love working on projects with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic. We know every single musician personally. We've contracted with them, we've gigged with them, we know what each of their sounds are, to the point that when we're listening, we can usually tell which violinist it is just from listening to the overall track. And that kind of intimacy also means we know that they trust us to have their back in the recording process. And I think that's really our role as audio engineers, is to give them the state of mind so that they can make the art, that we're capturing everything and we're going to be producing the highest quality project. So one of the things when we're working on big projects that are spanning multiple years is we need the whole album to have a storyline that works through it. And so what we did with that is 2 years ago when we recorded Of Thee I Sing, we took note of the exact mic setup that we do. So we're doing a very classic setup, Decatree with M149s, ribbons as our outriggers, and then a bunch of spot mics. And what we're doing today, over 2 years later, I think, is the exact same mic setup that we had before. So we've got actually the same microphones in the same place. Recording classical music is different from pop music, and the way I describe this to my students is that when you're recording pop music, you're doing what I call layer caking. So you record the drum set, you record the bass, you record the guitar. They're all recorded separately and then layer caked on top of each other. When you're recording classical music, what you're doing is what I call vertical slicing. So we'll have 28 to 32 mics on stage. All of them are capturing the full orchestra, but they're all bleeding into the other mics. The sound is happening everywhere all at once. So you can't take the oboe solo from this take and then the timpani solo from another. You have to have a full vertical slice of all of them put together. During the production process, you're really relying on the orchestra to have all 70 to 100 people give you a perfect moment, and that's the moment that you're using and putting together. Our approach to classical recording is we don't want it to just be a reproduction of the sound that's happening, we want it to be a reproduction of the feeling you get from that live performance. And that means that it has to have an immediacy, that because you don't have that visual stimulus of actually being there, the recording has to actually sound larger than life to bring you into it. And so the way we do that is by capturing really high fidelity recordings of every single sound element that's happening on stage.
During the live performance, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the score and I'm keeping track of essentially all of the great takes that we have. So I actually have 2 different color post-its. So if it's great, it gets the green. Green means go, right? If it needs to be re-recorded, it's orange. And so what I actually do is I don't just mark the page, but I actually mark in the score which measure and which instrument there was a mistake in, so then we can go back and listen specifically for that thing. What we do in between the end of the concert and then the start of the patch, we have about 40 minutes. We essentially gather the troops and everybody who has notes. We make a list of priority, going down to if we have time. When you only have 20 minutes like we had the first one, we only really got 2 additional takes of each passage. Really, we were moving at lightning speed. As soon as something was recorded, we all conversed in the room and nodded our heads yes, and then we moved on to the next one. I actually have a microphone that I'm yelling at the musicians, so as soon as they stop, I'll go, okay, good, now measure 27, go. And then they'll just pick up and go. One of the really cool things about classical recordings versus recordings in other genres is a lot of the money that goes into making the recording actually goes to the personnel costs, the musician costs, because there are just so many of them. A lot of times pop musicians will spend a lot of their money on the mix and the master after the fact. We're actually spending the money on the musicians themselves. So every minute that we go into the patch, or every minute we go over our allotted time, essentially equals thousands of dollars. So yeah, pretty much don't make a mistake and just let it roll. The sheer amount of musicians that we were working with in these recordings is astronomical. Of the I Sing included a 200-piece choir along with a 70-piece orchestra. Also, the orchestra plays pretty much the whole time. The choir does not. They sat on stage for the first 15 minutes without making a sound.
With Of the I Sing, we were trying to get the hugeness of the choir, that larger-than-life sound of a 200-person choir and a 100-person orchestra. When you're recording a violin concerto, what you're trying to get is that intimacy of the violin. A concerto is often talked about as a dialogue between the orchestra and the violinist. And so with this situation, we're trying to get those moments of just intimate dialogue and then those moments of huge kind of catastrophic sounds. And so that's that kind of dance that you play. So you have to have all the mics positioned so in the quietest moments you're capturing everything, but it can still take those huge blasts and those huge orchestral hits that Leshnoff loves to put in there. So after we're done capturing the sound, we start the post-production process. And so the first step is to take all of the sounds that we've gotten and then edit them together into what we call a comp or a compilation track. That's all the best measures we captured. And so the hard part of this is they also have to make musical sense to each other. So you're doing these crossfades between them, but they also have to be musical. They have to sound like these were natural transitions from one thing to another. So after we do that, we end up sending it to Leshnoff and Alexander, and then we also ended up working on Of the I Sing with Elizabeth Ostro, who was a really wonderful mentor to us in the process. For each person, basically, they would take a new revision, sit on it for 2 weeks, listen to it a bunch of times, and then come up with a list of notes of, measure 43, I hear something, the articulation isn't quite right in the basses. Can we find something that's better? And so what we do is we'll search through all the rest of the takes and see if there's something that feels more natural, feels better, is more musical, or is a cleaner take. The end product, and this is what I want all of the listeners to know, is everything that comes out of a label like Naxos has had dozens, if not hundreds, of artists who have poured their hearts and souls into it.